Here we are. Countries are teaching AI in kindergarten. They're investing in research and startups. So, how can we prepare our children to compete in the global workplace? Hi, I'm your host, Dr. Ed, and congratulations for investing in the future of your family by joining us on AI Parenting Live. We are a judgment-free community moving from screen time to quality time. And our motto is don't sedate, relate to create. And today we are creating the future by looking at the past, the Ai Sputnik Crisis that launched a new arms race for today. We're going to also explain how to prepare our children in the future to be competitive in a global workplace. So are you ready? Let me know if you are ready to go. In the chat as well, we should be online and ready to go. Awesome. Cool. So the three topics, let me open up the title slide. So the three topics that we are going to explore today, and many of them, I just want to give credit, they're based on the AI Superpowers book by Kai-Fu Lee. The three topics that we're going to cover today, the first one is AI in kindergarten. Then we're going to explore the 4 revolutions in AI. And the third is we're going to talk about thriving in an AI world. All right, so let's dive into it. Oh, hey, Alice, I can see Alice is here. Awesome. Hide slides. Okay. Thank you. Glad you can join us. Bring that up on the chat. Hopefully you can see it. So the first one, let me go back. The first one is AI in kindergarten. So let me tell you a tale of two countries from the AI Superpowers book by Kai-Fu Lee. Now, US media reports described a nation in shock shortly after the launch of the Sputnik satellite. Science fiction author Arthur C. Clarke said that the day that Sputnik orbited around the Earth, the US became a second-rate power. It had an instant and profound effect on the American psyche and government policy. And less than a year later, billions went into initiatives ranging from defense to research, and it led to the creation of the National Aeronautics Space Agency, or NASA. The US was graduating fewer scientists a year than Russia. So Russia was graduating more scientists per year. So lawmakers passed the National Defense Education Act, or NDEA, that provided financial assistance, and it helped more than double college enrollments from 15% of age-eligible students to 40% in under 10 years. So that's a huge, huge feat. Now you might be wondering, okay, maybe I know this story already, like, why are you saying it again? And, what does this have to do with AI? Well, first I got to explain the game of Go. So many of you have heard about the game of Go. The game of Go was invented more than 2,500 years ago in China. Chess, if you look at the total range of possibilities, it's around 10 to the power of 120 possible moves. But if you think about it, like Go has not 10 to the power of 120, but 10 to the power of 174 possible moves. Now that's more than double the number of planets in our known universe, number of possibilities difference. And so the emphasis in Go has always been on calm thinking and strategy rather than tactics. And it was seen as kind of like the mark of true intelligence in China. And for thousands of years, it has been seen as like, this is the pillar of this is the pillar of intelligence, like of the calm thinking mind in China. Now, in China, over 280 million viewers watched the 2016 Go match, where 18-time world champion Lee Sedol was defeated 4-1 by AlphaGo. So you guys remember this one? I'm going to quickly respond to say, hi, Alice. Overnight, China was swept by an artificial intelligence fever. And only a year later, and it's funny how history repeats itself, because this is very much the Sputnik playbook. Just a year later, the Chinese central government announced a plan to be the center of global innovation in AI by 2030. So Chinese venture capitalists that year poured record sums into AI startups, making up 48% of all AI venture funding that year and exceeding the United States for the first time. So they're investing more in AI than any other platform or any other country. And remember that image that I showed earlier? Let me bring it. Let me refresh your memory just in case. Remember this image right here? So in 2018, photos of an artificial intelligence textbook for Chinese kindergarten students, this photo, went viral. It turns out that UNESCO AI researchers and AI researchers from Google, the Institute of Automation of the Chinese Academy of Sciences, and top Chinese universities all collaborated on the textbooks. And the aim was to democratize AI education in 100 Chinese schools and to introduce preteens to the basics, to strengthen teenagers' capability for using intelligent and applied technologies, and to help train hundreds of new AI teachers. So the initiative also included a cloud-based AI e-learning platform that students can access via their computers or WeChat if they were on mobile. The platform also supports major machine learning frameworks, including TensorFlow, which many are familiar with, CNTK, which is kind of the Chinese equivalent of TensorFlow, and Caffe programming. And they included programming environments such as Scratch 3.0 and Python's integrated development environment. And anybody who's doing development in AI is typically using Python is very common for a lot of AI development. So it's a very capable tool, even for commercial use as well. So in April 2018, we're talking just 2 years, I guess, since that event, the Sputnik moment in 2016, 40 high schools in Shanghai began using this Fundamentals of Artificial Intelligence textbook that I just showed, the later versions of it, compiled by SenseTime. And those, if you don't know what SenseTime is, it is a unicorn startup in AI, and it's considered the world's most valuable AI startup, and it's located in China. So you might be thinking, oh man, teaching AI in kindergarten, that's got to be really hard, right? But actually, it turns out there are really great resources online, and there are books available that make it easy to discuss. And so I'm not talking from a theoretical perspective here. I've actually tried some of these examples out with my 5-year-old son yesterday. Do you guys want to see some of these examples? Yes? Let me know in the chat while I get it set up. Cool. Oh yeah, experiments.withgoogle.com. So maybe you've seen some of these examples, and I don't want to completely bore you with the details, but I do think it's very important, if you are not familiar with them, take a look at these examples because they are really, really cool. So I'm going to bring up the Mac. Okay, hopefully you can see that and you can see me. So these are, you go to experiments.withgoogle.com and you should be able to see these examples. So what you'll see is a collection of different AI experiments, and on them, what I really like is this one, Teachable Machine by the Google Creative Lab. And you can also go to teachablemachine.withgoogle.com. And here they have a number of different examples. And so I like these examples because they are fairly easy to understand and they're fairly easy to work with kids on. Where's the rest of the pages on this? Okay, no problem. Launch experiment. Yes, here it is. Okay, yes. So they have 3 different examples that I really enjoy. One of them is just being able to classify different types of images, which I thought was really cool. They have another one which deals with sound, so it could detect the difference between clapping, snapping, and whistling. And so that was kind of fun. And there's another one that specifically deals with poses. So the pose example was one where you tilt your head to the left, you tilt your head to the right, and it will track your face and it'll tell you like, oh, you're tilting one way or the other. And so to actually play them, you don't need any code. You can just, like for example, with the head tilt one, and I apologize, like this is not gonna look great because it's through my camera, but you just go down to the very bottom of it, and then you can click, I exported this website on Glitch. And so Glitch is just like a place to run some code, and you have to authorize to use your camera. And then once you've done that, you can basically run this example right away, which is kind of cool. Oh, allow, sure. So might be asking for more permissions than I'm allowing it to do right now, which is cool. It could be also because I'm doing the live stream, so it's not going to work. No worries. So to me, like examples, like I mentioned, the head tilt, the sound of a clap, or a snap or a whistle, and they also have an example of detecting the ripeness of a banana. And that was fun. Like we even, like my son and I, we ate the banana afterwards to see if the ripeness actually matched the AI prediction. And we learned the hard way that actually it didn't. And we may need to retrain the AI for organic bananas since they turn a little greenish color when they ripen. And so what I love about this is even if it doesn't work perfectly, this is a beautiful example. And it's a great opportunity to have a discussion about why the teachable machine did not work. Why didn't it work? Did it not have enough data? Did it not have enough examples of ripe bananas? Was the AI only looking at color? So we could do some experiments like what happens if I have a yellow shirt or I have something yellow in the background? We could try that out too, right? And the reason why this is so important is because understanding where it gets things wrong is actually the key purpose of this. Like this is why we're doing this discussion. And helping us understand AI, at least from the basics perspective, is so important because I feel like we're at this massive fork in the road right now for education. I've talked about how we can either choose to move towards creative learning and we'll understand the AI technology, or we will choose to not learn it and then we'll be moving towards this world of AI proctored learning and working. That is, like, people are using AI to monitor if students are cheating on exams. And this proctoring is not only going to take place in education, but also in the world of work as well. In the freelance economy, your ratings basically determine how much new work will come your way, which is a really important point. And my suggestion is if you do nothing today, like these tiny little experiments are an easy thing to do at home as a starting point. You can see this and many other examples at experiments.withgoogle.com. And so go and check it out. Those would be fun. And maybe I'll just write it down, experiments.withgoogle.com. So that's a fun little example to try out. So I'd love for you to see it. When do you think this change will be fully implemented? Okay. So Alice asks, oh, how come I can't see it? What's going on? Oh, I see. Yes. No, sorry. So Alice asks, when do you think this change will be fully implemented? And I think this is a good comment to highlight now. Um, my understanding is that depends on which country you're asking, but in China, this has already been implemented in 2018. There were the 40 high schools. Now, in terms of full implementation, my understanding is that they have set very specific targets for 2020, 2025, and 2030. And so there will be expectations of broader rollout. And I think like they need to get things started 2020, and then they have to show like very specific improvement by 2025. And then by 2030, the expectation is they are world leaders. So my expectation, Ellis, is that this is happening sooner than we think. And in terms of full rollout, I mean, you won't become the world leader unless you have the full rollout before then. So probably 2025 to 2030 is their current plan, at least in terms of implementation. And so that's exactly why it's very important to talk about this now. We're like early 2021, you still have some time to consider it. And I do think it's a good point because it helps us galvanize our group, our population towards one particular goal. What do we want our future to look like? What do we want to be able to win at? The question is the US working on this as well? That's another great question, Alice. So my understanding is actually yes. And that leads me to my next point. Actually, thank you. This is perfect. This is your timing is fantastic. So I want to refer people to another discussion that I found that was really helpful. Was chapter 2 of the Teaching AI book by Michelle Zimmerman. She's located in Seattle, and she's an education researcher who's been working on this for some time. And in chapter 2, what I like about her book is that she does it with interviews. Her chapter 2 is called Preparing Students for the Future. And what it is a series of case studies where she interviewed a number of people who actually worked on AlphaGo or who are design leads at Google. And so they're written by experts in the field. And I think that this is really good. So the AI book by Michelle Zimmerman is a really good resource for educators. She does that full interview with the Google AI researchers and like the product developers on the future of work. And I think that that's a good discussion because hear from them, hear from the professionals who are already working on this. What do they say? What's going to happen with work? And what do we need to look out for? So that's a good, that would be my recommendation, is because these are discussion items. They have questions that are already designed to be very relevant. It's a very relevant topic for the different age groups. So she's kind of already designed that. And so rather than reinvent the wheel here, I'm going to recommend you the kind of the good stuff. So I hope that answers your question, Alice. Let me know if there's something else, but good question. So I'm going to write down the name of the book. It's called AI, or Teaching AI. Yeah, Teaching AI by Michelle Zimmerman. Yeah, cool. So the next step is to talk a little bit about the different phases of this revolution, this AI revolution. And I thought it was very insightful, and I wanted to share it with you. And they refer to this as the 4 AI revolutions. So in his book called AI Superpowers, Kai-Fu Lee explains that there are 4 main revolutions from AI. The first is the control of attention on the internet. So this is about influencing what you purchase, your political ideology, and ultimately influencing what kind of relationships you have. The second is the control of learning and working. And so this could influence how we do grading. I talked about AI proctoring, influencing insurance, also looking at freelance work and how that's going to impact jobs as a whole. And then the next is perception, AI perception. And then this is going to influence the surveillance industries, and it's going to blur the line between the digital and the physical, because now AI can start seeing into the world. They can start interacting with the world in a more meaningful way. which leads to the final phase, the fourth phase, which he describes as automation. And so this is an AI that is making decisions in the real physical world. And this is like the example would be automated cars, like autonomous cars. And so these are the phases that he describes. And I want to go into each one in a little bit more detail because I think he has some new insights that I didn't know about. And I thought it might be interesting for you to be aware of them as well. So first, the first revolution, Lee feels that America's already ahead in terms of controlling attention on the internet and impacting how we learn and work. So much of the world already relies on Google for search. Facebook is dominant in social networking. And of course, we also see a huge amount of investments in freelance platforms like Upwork and Uber. Yet, China is not far behind in these areas. We already see how TikTok created a very smooth mobile experience for watching videos. Didi was able to beat Uber in China, and WeChat has moved beyond WhatsApp in mobile payments. And in the education front, VIP Kid definitely provides online tutoring for over 500,000 students. So the volumes, the data, it's phenomenal. It's huge there. Now, the second phase is another area where Kai-Fu Lee feels that America has a big advantage, the second revolution. Remember, this is about changing how we work and learn. So one of the big differences between China and North America is the protection of intellectual property. So we have that in America. We don't really have that in China. And so as a result, Chinese companies have been very quick to copy the online services of American companies. And some were initially dismissed. They're like, oh, that's almost an exact replica of an original interface, say one from America. Yet it is this hyper competitive environment in China and this ability to quickly adapt to the needs of the Chinese market that made it so hard for American companies to succeed. Consider Groupon. There were over 5,000 Groupon clones in China. They're all competing for the same group buying market. Groupon itself, like the original company, had such a hard time competing because by the time that they had arrived in China, there were so many alternative business models that had been tried and tested and were preferred over the original Groupon model. In his book, AI Superpowers, Kai-Fu Lee explains that eye tracking studies of search results found that Chinese internet users were spending a lot more time browsing all the different search results. So they wouldn't just like go and look at the first result and then click on it. No. They would look and they would browse, like they look here, they look there, they look all over the page. And they were like, why are people doing that? Why is it so different? And they said that actually they preferred browsing these results similar to how you go to a mall just to go shopping and just to see what's out there, rather than getting that, like, it's rather than going into one store and getting that one thing that you need and then leaving. Their behaviors were different. And so what this caused is because they behave a little bit differently, from this hyper competitive market rose these battle-hardened entrepreneurs that knew precisely what strategies would work on their local market, making it extremely difficult to compete, right? You could have even the best service out there, get better algorithms, doesn't matter because you haven't really tailored to their market. And those companies have not only created what you have, they've really tailored to the needs of that market. And that's what makes it so hard to compete. And so over time, several like competitive giants have arisen atop of this massive battlefield, this entrepreneurial battlefield. 3 of the top 5 unicorns, tech unicorns, come from China. So a unicorn is privately held over $1 billion. So it has to be not on the market. And so those three are the Ant Group, which owns Alibaba, ByteDance, which owns TikTok, and Didi, which I talked about before, which does transportation services. So the interesting thing about this new world of AI is that actually the quality of a deep learning artificial intelligence is determined much more by the quantity of data than the expertise of its developers. So this is very different, right? It's not about who has the bigger brains, who has the better research, who has the better developers. No, it's about who has more data. And if you have more data, you have a better algorithm. It's kind of, it doesn't matter how good your research is. And so there are two resources that are most needed for really successful AI today, and they are computing power and data. And China has huge advantages in both of these areas. They have more mobile smartphone users than the US and Europe combined. And with systems like WeChat, they have mobile payments that they conduct way more financial transactions with their phones than we do. Like, for example, well, what's holding America back? Well, I mean, they're credit card companies, right? Like, they don't want you to move to all to mobile payments. That wouldn't be good for their business. So there's things like that prevent that from happening. And so that's huge in terms of the data that they have. These mobile companies now have way, way more data. It's like, imagine all of the data of your credit card company now appearing in like WeChat. Like, how powerful would you be if you had that level of data? And how much more at a disadvantage would like say just WhatsApp be compared to WeChat if it doesn't have that data? Like, that's the difference that we're talking about. Does that make sense? So they also have an advantage in computing power because they manufacture many of the consumer electronics like smartphones, laptops, and most importantly, graphics cards that speed up AI processing. Now, that's not to say, I just want to be clear, that's not to say that they're suddenly going to like trump or beat NVIDIA. No, they're not going to do that, but they're really close to copying, right? And if you look at the graphics cards that they do a lot of the manufacturing of it in China. So they're not that far off from producing AI compatible chips. And so I wouldn't discount it too soon. Even if they just have to buy the chips, say from NVIDIA, they'll still be competitive. That it doesn't need to be better. It just needs to be like, I have access to it. Now, third, this is the third revolution. When it comes to AI perception, the AI perception revolution, Li pointed to the electronics manufacturing hub of Shenzhen and its ability to quickly generate new low-cost products that are just so hard to compete against. The example he pointed to was the unicorn drone maker, DJI, and their ability to hold over half of the global drone market. But that's not the only example. I mean, Foxconn, the company that makes the most mobile phones, they own more than half of the world's supply of computer numerical control, or CNC machines. If you don't know what they are, they're just the things that take a block of aluminum and they like drill it until it becomes the shape of your iPhone. And so they're way ahead in terms of the physical creation. And that's going to make it very difficult to compete, because if you are in America and you're trying to create a similar product, it would take you months. You'd have to find all these manufacturers. You'd have to source things from many different areas. Versus in Shenzhen, you just walk across the street and it's like, oh, there it is. Put all those pieces together. It's really cheap. I don't have to pay for shipping. I can get everything I need. If I need some help, there's somebody who can help me build it. You know, I have a prototype done, and then now I can just go to each one of the manufacturers and I can say, can you build this for cheaper? Can you build this for cheaper? And so, like, within a month, I've done my whole product iteration cycle. By the time, it would take like potentially a year to do development elsewhere. And so that's a big, big difference in terms of the perception revolution, because creating the devices that perceive, like a drone, for example, is a lot of work. There's a lot of prototyping involved, and is not easy to do. So that's a big, big difference. And then the fourth revolution is when we, like, what starts as just perceiving the world, it doesn't take very long before that quickly moves towards that fourth AI revolution of acting on the real world. And we tend to think about uh, technology change, like just in terms of the technology, but not from a society change example. So, for example, the famous example is the Jetsons. They had an incredibly futuristic technology, voice control for writing out your letters. They had like ways of making food, robotic cleaning maids, and it was interesting. But they lived in this society that, from our perspective today, might seem very backwards. In fact, like this society of the Jetsons, wives stayed at home. Um, and so it's kind of this telltale sign that when we consider technology, it is so important for us to consider the society. Where is the society going? And the society, where the society goes, is more important than where the technology goes. Like it doesn't matter what AI really does. It's about what people do with AI. And when people think about, oh, like how many jobs are going to be lost, I've seen there's all these weird statistics. Like some will say, oh, 50% of job tasks can be replaced. I'm like, yeah, but I mean, people will just do other tasks. Well, like 9% or 10% of the full job could be replaced. Well, that's not really what happens. So, for example, autonomous cars will probably have more impact than merely just replacing drivers, like Uber drivers. The example that I've seen in another book that I've read called "Measure What Matters" by John Dewar. He's like one of the first funders, I guess, of Google. He talked about Zume, Z-U-M-E. It's a pizza startup that bakes the pizza using robots, and it can, in theory, bake that pizza on a truck with the goal of getting you like a hot pizza delivery on your choice in less time. And so that changes the whole nature of food delivery. What happens if your ghost kitchen is no longer a ghost kitchen, it's a mobile ghost kitchen, and like things are cooked along the way? That's just a very different environment. That's just a very different world to live in. So something to consider. I don't know if that'll happen. I mean, like what happens if you have an accident and all your pizza and everything goes crazy, or I don't know. Like, I don't know what's really going to happen, but you have to consider the society impacts beyond just the technology. The good news is that it costs the same amount of money to hire a robot in America as it does to hire one in China. So we are seeing a move towards local manufacturing today. But the main problem is that it's not resulting in us hiring a lot more workers. The famous example would be the Foxconn facility. There was this expectation that so many workers were going to be hired, but they didn't need that. Like, why would I hire them? It's so much cheaper to buy the automation, the robotics. And so pause for a second, because this point is really, really important. And I want to make sure that it's all sinking in so far. So can you tell me, is this making sense so far? Is this sinking in? Sinking in so far? Let me know in the chat. I would love to hear. Okay, thank you from Alice. I do really appreciate that. The feedback is very helpful. So we live in a society where much of our own feeling of self-worth is tied up with the work that we do. But when an AI is able to do many of the tasks that we have practiced for years, like to get to the point where we become experts in it, we need to ask the question of what does it mean? What does it mean to thrive as a human being on this planet? And I want to jump on to Alice's point that, yeah, it makes sense. It's a little scary. It is a little scary. But I think that there is some good hope. And to me, that the goal is to scare, but also to provide a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. So I hope I can do that next. But My answer would be yes. It is scary, 100%. So let me show you what I mean. So my last point is, I'll make some room, thriving in an AI world. So Kafka famously proclaimed that a book must be the axe for the frozen sea inside of us. A book must be the axe for the frozen sea that is inside of us. It must break through our barriers towards what our core, our deepest desires are. And I'm happy to say that AI Superpowers is a book that does just that at the end. Kai-Fu Lee talks about his experience with stage 4 lymphoma and how it fundamentally changed the priorities of his life. Oh, Alice, really appreciate that. Alice says, this is exactly why I love these webinars. Thank you, Alice. So awesome. So it was in his struggles, Kai-Fu Lee's struggles, to write his own will, that he discovered that the things that were most important to him were not the people he was influencing. Like, he was a huge influencer. He said like 50 million followers on Weibo. Probably like he's the equivalent of Elon Musk on that platform. That's how many people he was influencing. But it was the very family that he had been neglecting in order to gain more influence. You know, he visited a Buddhist monk who asked him, Kai-Fu Lee, what is the purpose of your life? To which he quickly responded, because he knew this response. He's been programming himself for this. He says, my purpose in life is to maximize my impact on the world. And the monk thought about his response, and he turned to him, and he said, are you impacting the world, or are you impacting your own ego? Think about this deeply. And Kai-Fu Lee's story is a strong reminder to not neglect our social connections with each other. Like, in the end, it's going to be our relationships that is going to create these movements, that's going to lead to the society that we want the most. And so if we don't critically think about what we would like our society to be today, we are going to be subject to the society that the AI superpowers create for us. And AI is an inherently monopolistic technology, since people's data always goes to the best solution. Why doesn't Bing work as good as Google? Data. Google has far more data than Bing, and that is why it's able to win. This data, and this, like, let's call it like a data moat, makes it very difficult for others to compete, even if they have superior technology. And that means that AI is going to create this growing inequality, and a large portion of the population will not be able to earn enough income in order to make a living wage moving forward. And I know that some proponents kind of say, like, nah, come on, there's no way that that's the case. Like, we said the same thing. We said exactly the same thing when manufacturing first started. We said, oh, all the jobs for farmers is going to be gone. There's going to be nothing. And there's the famous party led by Nick Ludd, who would go in to the factories and smash up the machines, hence creating the term Luddites. And so, yeah, like, why would it change? Like, why? That's not really going to happen, right? I think it's important to realize that in this particular case, this isn't, the purpose of it isn't to make your manufacturing quicker and to give you other positions. It's actually to like remove the number of people that is needed. Companies like Uber would love to get rid of all of their human drivers. We use humans, if you think about it, like humans in the loop right now for a lot of these systems is just because it's really hard for AI to do them or computers to do them, automation to do them right now. But if there was a way, then they would be all over that, and then they would just get rid of them. So like Uber would make way more profit if they didn't have any actual drivers. In the same way, Amazon, right, would have, like, they started off with workers in the warehouses which are driving to the shelves and picking up stuff, putting them in boxes. And now those workers stay in one stationary place, and then the shelves come to them, moved by robots. And Amazon would love nothing more than to get rid of that last stage of the person there and just have like a robot doing all the picking and moving and sorting and putting stuff into the boxes. And so it's different. Like there's a financial incentive. There's a strong financial incentive to get rid of workers as much as possible. And it may come to us, like the educators, the parents, the people in society, to say like, no, this isn't the society that we want. We want to see some things changed. And that's why we're doing the things that we're doing today, is to give you some insights as to, well, what do we need to watch out for? We need to pay very close attention to growing inequality. This is getting worse. It will continue to be worse, not better. Things like bias that we've talked about, those are things that we need to worry about as a society, because they are not going to have a profit incentive. So what this means is you're not going to see any change unless it becomes really profitable for that company to make the change. And so you have to make it profitable for them, right? To say like, we need to change the law, and if you don't do this, you can't operate in our country or in our jurisdiction. So that's one way of doing it. But we need to, no matter what, we need to think about all of this differently. So let me go back a little bit. Yeah. You know, I hope you found that today's session was helpful. And if you have any questions, like, feel free to ask them. I'd love to hear what questions you might have. You know, in my lifetime, I've gone through a ton of books, but only a handful of them have really opened up my view on the world. And some of those examples include Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Andrew Yang's The War Against Normal People, and this book, Kai-Fu Lee's AI Superpowers, which I will plug one more time. Bloop. You can get the book on on Amazon or on Audible. I actually listened to the Audible version, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. And if you want, I can leave a link to the book, but just say like AI Superpowers by Kai-Fu Lee. Do I have a reading list on my website? That's a good question. I am in the process of doing that. Like, actually, the closest thing I have to a reading list right now is my blog post. So if you go to aiparenting.live /blogs, you'll see some of my posts, and then in there I have some references. I have references to books there. So there's another way of getting access to them. It's a great question. So I think that every so often there's a good one, and this is a good one. I would say I like this one. I can honestly recommend. If you are able to, I think it's helpful for you to understand how the world might be changing and how much of an impact that has from the expert. Like, I am not the expert. I'm learning just like you guys. When I read this book, I was like, I have to share it. I felt like, it would be a disservice to everybody who's involved with AI parenting to not talk about this book and not recommend this book, because it is directly in line with everything that we're talking about. And it fit with the way I was thinking already about it, but it gave numbers, and it gave more clarity onto it. And so I felt that was very, very important. And so, a good one. So question from Alice. So how do we address the equity gap in education? The equity gap in education. Are you talking about gender equity, or are you talking about race equity? I guess it doesn't matter, right? Like all of it is an equity issue. This is a really tough issue because especially when much of learning has gone online, we know that online learning is not accessible to everyone. People don't have devices. Internet access is not universally available. In the province of Alberta, where I live, 1/3 of our land area does not have broadband internet access. So if you live in any rural area, you're in a lot of trouble. You're unlikely to get internet access. You can't even get cell phone connections out there because we have the Rocky Mountains. And so that continues to be a problem. And it means that we need to have both physical and digital alternatives. Like we can't just depend only on that. And we need to focus a little bit more on community learning. It could be, like the community. Sometimes we walk in our community and there are little community bookshelves that you can open, and they have like different resources that you can access. We need like small things like those things to help. But we also, I think the big thing is differentiation. And this is why I focus so much on like the whole purpose of AI parenting is moving from sedation. We don't want sedation to relation and ultimately to creation. Because in the end, it is not going to be up to us to whether or not people are going to solve this equity gap. It is going to be based on the motivation of those learners. Despite all odds, they're going to find some way to connect. They're going to find some way to learn, but only if we motivate them. But if we keep like kind of drilling down that everybody's got to learn the same thing, and you're learning stuff that is not really going to be that relevant for you, like why would you even be motivated to do that? And we are debating that right now in Alberta with our own curriculum revisions. Like there's just so much stuff out there that is information that can be Googled, and people still don't understand, like, why do I need to learn this stuff? How is this going to help me in the future? And I think that's the big gap, is that there's a big gap between curriculum and relevancy to their future. But if you can point to things like, look at the stats, guys, look at how much your work is changing. You're likely going to be working freelance. Do you know what freelance means? Freelance means your boss is not a person. Your boss is an AI, and the AI is going to be determining whether or not you get more gigs in the future, how well you do SEO. Those are all things that are going to affect how employable you're going to be in the future. And I think that because you mentioned like reference back to this topic about helping children thrive. One thing that he emphasizes is that in building those types of relationships, those back to basics, like back to and I've heard this so many times, it's interesting. Sugata Mitra, you know him from like the hole in the wall computer. He said the same thing, is that if you go back to basics, it really boils down to the Socratic method, because that allows people to ask questions, to be a part of that dialogue. And when you are part of that dialogue, you are in a way that people are naturally learning. They're really curious naturally, stoking that curiosity, letting them explore the world and just pointing them in the direction of, well, I don't know the answer to that question, but if I were to find out, this is how I would find out. And assuming like teaching like Google exists, it's like, well, I don't know, let's go find out together. It gives them that example of curiosity that they're going to need, that are the life skills. And the thing that they said that I spoke to another parent today about was the thing that we really need to focus on is the critical thinking, the deep critical thinking, going deep. And that only comes when you go deep in the relationship. And so when we start doing deep relating, deep connecting with others, I think the Kafka-esque taking the axe to to that ice, the cold surface on the inside, that we really start to get them to the point where that spark, the passion that they have starts to really bubble up to the top, and then we start to really see them growing. And this may not happen for everybody. It doesn't need to, right? Not everybody's going to be like the next entrepreneur, but if we can enable some to do this, it will be better for everyone. Because I'm hoping that we are going to do things like teach more social entrepreneurship in schools, because we need more enterprises for which profit is not the main objective, but like social benefit, social good is more the benefit. And I'm hoping that in the future, more students, especially more Gen Z, is going to be interested in working for like B corporations and social enterprises than they are for like just a profit-driven corporation. It's a dream. I realize it's an optimistic goal, but I think no matter what, that's like, we need to move towards something like that, because we can't keep running the way that we're running. If we keep running using the profit motive, we are going to be in a lot of trouble. We have to change things. And this relates to my kind of last slide, which is more my call to action for next week that I want to share with you. See if we can bring this up. Next week, we'll be expanding actually on this topic, on the topic of children who thrive, with education coach, author, and advocate, George Valenzuela. Note that we're changing up the time a little bit to be on a Saturday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Mountain, and 11 a.m. Eastern. We're doing this because of his schedule, but also because I have like a school council's AGM the following day, and I wouldn't be able to make it. And so I want to thank you for being a part of this journey of discovery with me on AI parenting. We really love your comments, your feedback, and we're excited about where this is going. And let me hide slides. Let me see. Higher ed has to offer. Okay, let me bring this one up. I just want to make sure I've addressed this one. Okay, so Alice says, higher ed has to offer more short-term micro certificates for instructors who want to build new skills. Yeah, absolutely. Ah, Martin! Oh, he's here. This was great, Doctor. Hey, good to see you, man. Oh, I appreciate it. Thanks for saying hi. I appreciate it. So now in terms of micro certificates and for instructors, absolutely. I think that if anything, this is where we're seeing things heading. Think of your resume. So imagine like a resume is not it's not your degree. It's not just your degree. And the reason for that is you have to think about like your SEO, not CEO, SEO for your resume. It's not just your degree, because your degree is not searchable. Because if I search for people with bachelor's degrees or bachelor's degrees in education, I'm going to get too many results. You are not going to bubble up to the top. And so you have to think about like resumes as keyword optimization. And this is what a micro credential is. A micro credential is keyword optimization, literally. On LinkedIn or some other platform. That's basically what a micro credential is. And I think this is an important point, is that we must have some thought about, it's not going to be enough for you to differentiate. Even if you're on Fiverr today, like honestly, like it's not enough to just say, oh, okay, well, I've got like a degree, like hire me. No, that's not going to work. So I think that just keep thinking about micro-credentials and what that means for keyword optimization. Keep thinking about this from a higher ed perspective. I absolutely do think that's going to change. And the key thing here is that when it comes to the AI Sputnik, what did they do? They invested crazy amount of money into AI, into funding education. especially giving loans so that people could go and have college degrees. And like I said, they took college degrees from 15% of the college-ready population at the time to 40%. So these kinds of small changes in funding can have a huge, huge impact. And so you want more people to, I don't know, take up research or advanced degrees, then fund it, make it happen, right? Like higher ed, if you start funding like that, then of course people are going to take it. Why would you not? Like, of course, like people want to improve themselves, and you give them the opportunity to do it, you're going to see en masse. And so if it's micro credentials, in this case, it's like, I'm going to give you a certain amount of money and you're going to get micro credentials. And if you want to get it for like AI, guess what? It's paid for. Like it's taken care of. If you want to do it for social entrepreneurship, whatever is your jam, I'm going to help fund that because I need more future economy stuff. I want you to grow. This is the thing, is like, how can we grow if our teachers don't grow, right? It's that generational change that gets people thinking differently, gets them more competitive on the world's marketplace, to go, yeah, you've got the skills that nobody else has got because you've learned things that nobody else learned. And if you learn the things that everybody else learns, forget it. You're not going to be competitive because you're competing against the world now. You're not competing against, like, the cost to switch to another freelance worker in a lower country is way cheaper. Oh, I love this. There's such a great conversation going on right now. Martine says micro-credentials should be available for educators, para-educators, classified staff, and especially parents. I totally agree. I love that. Is there a way for me to like these? I love it. Love it. Martine, yes. That was great. And yes, minimum qualifications for quality college and university instructors hold us back. Yes, absolutely. And that's the question, is what is holding us back right now from being more involved in preparing our kids for the future? How much of the things that we do right now are still going to be relevant? Like, do I really need to know, like, this aspect of history, this aspect of history? And I get it. Like, one thing we're learning is that curriculum is always political, right? Like, there's always some kind of message that they're trying to push. But as educators, the question is, what is it that's really going to cause that spark? It's never going to be those things. It's never going to be like how you can conform. And this is the battle that everyone faces in the pedagogy of the oppressed, as Paulo Freire says, is you're either a part of the system, like you're maintaining the status quo. That's kind of what we're doing, or we are rebelling. We're rebelling against it. And what is rebelling in this time? I think it's maybe saying things like, yeah, what we're teaching right now is not enough for us to be competitive in the market moving forward. We need to really rethink all of the things that we're teaching. And to do that, maybe I need to start teaching some things in AI. Maybe I need to start teaching you some things that nobody else has taught you before, because you didn't need to worry about that in the past, but now you do. Now you do. Half of you guys are going to be, at least statistically, half of them in Gen Z are already freelancing. What do I got to do? What do I got to teach you? And so this is why I love this conversation. Yes, learn and teach how AI builds student agency. Yes. AI, I think AI to me is really interesting, is like the tech law. So AI and programming is like the law in tech. And the reason I say that it's kind of like the law in tech, yes, is because it's inequality. From an inequality perspective, you are either going to understand this stuff, like how AI works, and potentially understand how that can be tweaked and be able to make changes or lobby for changes, or you're going to be subject to the rules. And those rules are extremely hard to change. Like, you can go and vote for a new president, but you cannot vote for a new, like, CEO of Facebook, for example, or a new CEO of Google. That decision is not up to you. And so we either understand code and we understand what it does to people, And more importantly, we understand what it does to society as a whole, and we lobby really hard to get those things changed, or we become subject to them. And so learning how AI is not only, like, I agree with you, it builds student agency because it means that, like, you feel like you're in control of your world again. It's like, oh my gosh, why am I seeing all this stuff on my TikTok? Why am I seeing, oh, it's because I looked longer at like this post. And why am I looking longer? Because my subconscious mind is, like, programmed to look at certain aggressive posts or maybe more suggestive posts. And these are normal things. And, I should expect that that's going to happen. So what's my strategy when I see these things? What should I be doing? How do I train myself differently? Even knowing that gives you so much more agency, not just students, but also adults, everyone. Everybody's so like, this world that we're in feels so not normal. But for our Gen Zs who grew up with the technology, they've never known anything but this. So it is normal to them. And for us to explain it to them requires us to help them understand the world that they're in and why they feel certain ways that they do, and give them the social emotional learning is now also an AI learning too. It's all connected. Like, if you start understanding, like, why does this work this way, and how does something like Tinder work, right? Like, there were studies for Tinder that just found that it was just appearance. It's just like that initial attraction. So that's why they got rid of all the text stuff, and they just went with the image, swipe left, swipe right, and you just keep going through all the different individuals. And why does it lead to the kinds of behaviors that we see in terms of relationships? It's exactly because that's what causes people to click, and we know this is what causes reactions. And so understand that. You understand AI, you understand your world, you control your world, you can change your world. You don't have to be subject to it. And yeah, I think to a certain extent, taking some time away, like Tiffany Shlain, she advocates for a tech Shabbat, which is just like a time where once a week they just no tech, so that you can reflect. I think is very valuable in our society today, because everything's go, go, go all the time. There's another thing. But if you took the time, you paused and reflect, and you go, well, why am I doing that? Like, is that really that important? Is that helping me build the connection with you? Is that helping me build the connection with my own family? Am I doing this because, like, the monk's question, am I doing this because of I want to impact other people, or is it because I want to impact my own ego? And I think if we keep thinking of it from the perspective of a lot of what we do on social media is impacting that your own ego, and really, if we want to go deep, like, we actually have to go way deeper with people. We gotta call them up, and we gotta have those longer conversations with people, not the not the 280 character tweets. There's only so much you can do in those. But again, it's relationship. You want to see what's not going to change, like the relationships with people, right? The connection that we have with each other, that's not going to change. Doesn't matter how good the AI gets. Yeah, it may be far superior than us, and that's going to make us question, why are we here? What's our purpose? Even more. And that's where we need each other. We need each other to come together and to say, our purpose is to define the society that we want, to think about it critically, think about what's happening right now, think about the news that you see and how that impacts your thinking, and then asking, is that good? Is that what you want? And if it's not what you want, then figure out a way to create that change. And that's why we say, like, these systems are designed to sedate you. When we start to relate, then you start to think about creating that future that you want in the future, that society that you want. I love this conversation. Man, I could do this like all day. But I know that you guys have time, and I want to have limited time, and I want to be respectful for you. So just as a quick reminder, bring it back up, and I'll take this one away. So George Valenzuela, next week, He's going to be helping us. We're changing the time, Saturday morning, 8 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Mountain. I want to thank you guys so much for being on this journey of discovery with me and on AI parenting. We love you all, and I mean this honestly. We are excited to see you. I'm excited to see you every single week, and we will see you next Saturday. Thank you. Goodbye.